FIFA is facing a growing backlash after its proposal to sell a stake in its top events. Europe's governing body, UEFA, has threatened to boycott the World Cup if this plan goes ahead. So does FIFA need private investment? This is Inside Story. Hey there, I'm Scott McLean. FIFA says each of its 211 members will benefit from a large injection of cash if private investors take up minority stakes in its events, including the World Cup and the Club World Cup. But football's governing bodies in North and Central America, Asia, and Europe are opposing the plan. The head of Europe's UEFA says those focused on maximizing financial return should not be allowed to dictate football's future. And a senior advisor to FIFA President Gianni Infantino has resigned in protest. Infantino says the plan is a golden opportunity to turbocharge the development of the game globally and that FIFA will go ahead with a, quote, open and democratic consultation with members. But will it have the votes? We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Laura Hahn.
The FIFA World Cup is the most watched sporting event on the planet. It attracts billions of viewers and generates billions of dollars. But this announcement by the World Football governing body FIFA to expand football development funding to over $10 billion has created one of its biggest political battles to date. It would set up a separate commercial wing called FIFA Forward Enterprise that would include the broadcast rights, sponsorship, ticketing and licensing. And this would increase funding for the sport. But this is what also drew the controversy. It plans to sell a 20% stake, opening the door to private investments. FIFA's head Gianni Infantino would need majority approval from its football confederations, hoping for a yes from 106 of 211 members.
It is an opportunity, but not an obligation.
But the maths is not adding up. The body that governs European football threatened to boycott all events, including the World Cup, if this deal goes ahead. It says UEFA and its national associations will not participate in FIFA competitions. CONCACAF, which runs North and Central America, has also rejected the proposal. And now the Asian Football Federation is also rejecting plans to sell a stake. Between them all, they have more than 140 votes, meaning the majority currently stands against. There has been more criticism about the possible involvement of Joshua Kushner. He heads up the proposed investment firm. He's also Jared Kushner's brother, Donald Trump's son-in-law. Smaller football associations have been quieter, with some organising meetings to discuss the matter. Now, FIFA says it could raise up to $40 million for all of its members. Strong investment for developing countries. Opponents argue this is about more than money and that FIFA is planning to sell the soul of football. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's bring in our guest in Bournemouth in the United Kingdom, Chris Brady, a football finance expert and chief intelligence officer for the Sportsology Group. In Paris, Bassirou Sakho, a FIFA licensed football agent and professor in the sports department at Sorbonne University. And in London, Keir Radnej, a football journalist covering politics and business and a former editor of World Soccer magazine. Thank you all for being here, gentlemen. Chris, we'll start with you. This whole idea of FIFA taking private investment, is this a good idea, or is this a solution in search of a problem?
It seems to be a solution in search of a problem to a certain extent. The idea of redistributing more funds is a sensible idea, but they could be accessed from the reserves. They've got reserves of over $3 billion, and no debt in the organisation, so they could do that. So there's clearly an idea that the whole unit of the FIFA is under monetized, and in some sense they want to over monetize it. So the whole idea is to generate more and more funds to be passed down to the smaller nations. This is why there's still some, in my view, some chance of this still going through to a certain extent, because the 40 million that's being offered to each nation for over the next cycle is really big money for some of these organizations that rely almost entirely on FIFA for funds.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, because Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, said, in his view, we want football to grow inclusively so that every country, large or small, shares in it. $20 million right off the bat is a lot of money, surely, for some of these smaller football associations. What would it mean to either these smaller or less well-funded football associations?
I think we have different reasons to analyze this situation. The first of all is for general principle. Okay, we have to ask if we are able to sell a share. Okay, if you look at it's just happened in rugby for the Six Nation tournament, they have some part to share. Okay, the Premier League also did it the same situation, for some part, and as well for the French Premier League. Well, for the general principle. Okay, that one is the first one. Okay, the second one is if you analyze for the FIFA case, we don't have the same interest. Okay, because for 40 million euros, if you have to share or to give this money for the CONCACAF or the African countries, I think is a lot of money. Okay. The second one is for European nation, big nation like UEFA. They don't need that one because, first of all, we have to accept the situation if we have financial problem, and it's not the case for everyone.
Yeah.
As I said, the case is for African countries or for South American countries. Okay, they can accept the situation. Okay, but for European one is different. Then we don't have the same interest. UEFA, then we do not have the crisis, and FIFA doesn't have a financial problem. They're getting richer. Like the last Africa World Cup, we have 48 countries. They just make a lot of money.
Yeah,
and I think they don't need that. Yeah, that's why we don't have the same interest.
But Bassirou, do you think that because some of these countries in Africa and South America are less well funded, do you think that they are more likely to say, yeah, we'll take the money, let's do the deal?
Of course, it's a lot of money for them. If you have all this money for African, each federation, and we have they have a lack of infrastructure, and you can use the money to build and to organize this football.
Yeah.
Okay. That why, but in UEFA don't need this situation, or they don't need that money. That's why I said we have different interests. And in Africa we have 54 countries, and I think the 54 countries, if they propose this amount of money, I think they should go and they should agree with them.
Yeah, Kier, look, obviously some football associations are better developed than others, and I've heard the argument made that if you go back a few decades in European football or in English football, you had stands that had no seats in them, you had pitches that were muddy, and the product on the field was not as professional and didn't have the quality that they have today in the Premier League. And a lot of people would say, look, the reason is because the sport has become professionalized. Private money has been injected into it, and it has made the game better. A rising tide has sort of lifted all ships. Do you buy that argument?
I think that's okay up to a point. But as I understand it, the idea that Infantino is promoting is that this is money that's really for the grassroots development of the game. In a lot of these member nations, 211 member nations of FIFA. I have to say that I think it's an extraordinary sum of money, and some of the federation presidents I've met down the years, I'm not sure that offering them sort of $20 million straight off is actually a responsible use of FIFA's money. I think there are so many arguments about this that to impose a short notice deadline, which is what Infantino has done, really is a tactic that will backfire on him.
It sounds like you're worried about some of this money being lost to corruption or financial mismanagement, because there have been some well-documented cases in places like Nigeria, Congo, Nepal, Bangladesh, where some money provided by FIFA has disappeared in the past. Is that the concern that you have, Keir?
Yes, of course it is, because FIFA has claimed that it's improved its accounting and policing processes of the development funds that it issues to its nation members. But keeping track of these sums is very, very challenging indeed. And I think this is one of the concerns about policing the idea, even if you accept the concept.
Yeah.
That is extremely questionable.
Basiru, do you share that concern about some of this money being swallowed up by corruption?
Yeah, we might have like something to fear the situation, because if you give, like you share 20% for the private company, and the thing is now, who gonna control this private company? Like, football, I think, will lose its essential substance, is football for all. And people, will be scared, and they have to be scared, because if you involve a lot in, because you have your money or financial money and your interest you have back, you can be involved, and people, they have right to be scared about the corruption, of course. Because if you give a lot of money and you need something, in return, and that makes the situation scary. Who gonna be the leader of all these private company? And how they can lead after? And the situation is a little bit, in moral term, can be scary, and we have to be scared.
Yeah, and certainly I want to ask about who these private investors will be. Chris, I want to ask you about a gentleman named Carlos Cordero. He's a senior advisor to Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, and he resigned in protest. And he said this, quote, "The FIFA president himself has highlighted the $15 billion in revenue generated between 2022 and 2026. Against that backdrop, selling a permanent stake in football's most valuable asset to raise $4.2 billion makes little sense." I mean, I'm just confused, because usually companies would take on investors if they're trying to scale up, trying to grow, trying to make investments, or if they have debt. FIFA doesn't seem to have either of these problems. So why do you think that they are wanting this extra money?
I think they look around at the other sports, especially the NFL and the big American sports, and they see the way in which they are monetized. And they look at themselves and say, well, actually, even though we're doing really well, we know we're in the same league as them. And yet, as your intro said, this is the biggest sport in the world. So they can't work out, how can that be? Surely we should be monetized in much greater detail. Then what they do is they say, well, okay, if we want to give everybody $40 million, how do we get that $40 million? Do we raise it from the revenue that we're actually getting already? And do we raise it from our reserves? Or do we go to investors for 20% of the organization and say, just give us 4.2 billion, and that enables us to give this extra money to the grassroots. And as you say, if you're somebody in the Oceania group, for example, you're Vanuatu or you're Tonga or Tahiti or any of these people with, as I say, tiny populations and entirely reliant on FIFA for your funding, you're going to see this as not necessarily a bad thing. If you're UEFA, however, you see this as somebody who might be using this extra investment to ramp up the number of operations they're going to have, ramp up the number of events they're going to have, ramp up the number of players they're going to be using in these events, and so on and so forth, and say, no, that cuts across us. So there is clearly a power play in action here, and the power play is between UEFA and FIFA, but there are also internal power plays within FIFA, as you've mentioned, with Cordero, for example, resigning. If we'd have been having this conversation 2 hours ago before Cordero resigned, you'd have been saying, well, this is sort of a 50-50 play here. But with Cordero resigning, you're thinking, is this the first rat to jump the ship? Or is Infantino under real pressure now? And that sort of changes the narrative a bit. And I think that's really important to think about that.
Yeah, Basiru, you represent players. You're a player agent. And correct me if I'm wrong, but FIFA is not paying World Cup players directly. They are paying the football associations, and then those associations are deciding how or if to pay their players. But all of a sudden, if FIFA becomes this for-profit behemoth, are players all of a sudden going to look at the World Cup and say, hold on, I make $10 million a year with my club. Well, I want to be paid, a couple million to play in this tournament.
Yeah, exactly. Now we have to fix the limit. What will be the next step if FIFA starting to act in this way? That's why I said earlier is caring, because as I said, FIFA doesn't need money it doesn't have a financial a problem to deal with this case. I think the case will be debate a democratic way, but the timing is, I think, too short, and I don't think so. Is debate a democratic way? As you said, he's like close advisor or assistant, I don't know, whatever. He just resigned. Maybe he's not agree with the case exactly. And now, if you look 2 days or this few days ago, we will have in kind of war or competition between FIFA and UEFA. Okay, and they try in country in France or Germany, people talking about we have to boycott. If the situation happen, we have to boycott for the next competition. That why is caring, I think we should debate it. As I said, it's not the same interest. As a football agent, I am scared. Maybe probably a few months later or next year, they will come with another situation for the football agent, or we have to fix how they're going to pay you, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Okay, in the timing is near in the next FIFA president election is in 2027. Okay, and maybe you have the idea behind, and Infantino knows in terms of vote. Okay, Africa and South American count a lot. Now the situation is if you have 54 African country, they agree, and South American country, I think that we know the balance.
Yeah, Keir, UEFA has said that they would boycott any events so long as this proposal is on the table. In fact, they're looking for binding assurances that FIFA will bury this and promise never to dig it up again. Do you think that anybody would watch a World Cup if European teams were not involved? And there actually is a under-20 Women's World Cup coming up in September, which potentially could be affected by this.
Interestingly, the Under-20 Women's World Cup is being staged in Poland, which of course is a member of UEFA and FIFA, and there are 6 European teams due to compete in it. I think the point about this is that a World Cup without European teams has not got anything like the value that Infantino would accrue from selling the real World Cup to investors. It would be a damaged product, and he would be a very damaged salesman. And I don't think without European teams that a World Cup as a commercial object has any legs at all.
Do you think that this whole proposal is dead in the water anyway, since UEFA has rejected it, CONCACAF has rejected it, AFC seems to be rejecting it, though not in as strong of language? If you add those up, that's, I think, 147 members. There's only 211. I mean, why are we even having this debate? Or do you think that other things could happen?
Well, Infantino could look for some wriggle room, I suppose. But basically, when he proposed this idea, he said that it was a question everybody had to accept it or it wouldn't go ahead. So at the moment, there is significant opposition. So as it stands, it can't go ahead.
Chris, do you think that UEFA will stand by its boycott pledge, or do you think they might get cold feet, especially with the World Cup, the Under-20 Women's World Cup coming up so quickly?
I think it would be very much a Mexican standoff to see who first blinked, because the World Cup without the Europeans in it doesn't make sense at all. However, having said that, for the Europeans to kill it off just before the next World Cup, which will be in Europe, in Spain and Portugal and Morocco, they're already gearing up for that. So it's a big decision for them to say, well, okay, we're going to kill the World Cup. So it would, I think there's a lot of negotiating to go on between now and the 19th of September. And it may all end up in 24 hours, but it may drag on until that last point at which Infantino has said this is the deadline.
Yeah. Basiru, do you think that Gianni Infantino is going to have a hard time getting reelected to his position come 2027?
Yeah, of course. I think it's going to be a hard time. But as I said, Infantino knows, like, maybe the European football, they can't accept the situation. But when he goes with, like, for an African continent and South America, yeah, I think he can that the situation can happen in terms of vote, as I said. And the thing is, like, the timing, like, he sent the letter for the whole, like, confederation, like, they have to answer before the deadline is the 19th of September, who is really, really short. They don't have any time to discuss, okay, to debate, okay, and to check what is good and what is bad. Yeah, but I think it's going to be like, it's going to be a hard situation like we are dealing with. And it's unfortunately sad for our football. As like one of my co-debaters said, like, we have now, if the situation happen without European, we have to change the name. We don't call them a World Cup. It's not a World Cup. You can find another name, but not a World Cup. A World Cup is for a world.
Yeah. Keir, do you accept the argument coming from FIFA that, look, this is minority investment that they are soliciting, and because it's minority investment, they will essentially have no power? Look, even the club that I support in England, AFC Wimbledon, they are a fan-owned club. They have minority investors and they can give advice, but they essentially have no power. Do you think that the same thing would apply, given that the minority investors in this case, though, are names like J.P. Morgan or Joshua Kushner, the brother of President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner?
Well, and who are the others? We don't know.
It's a good question.
I don't think it's the same argument. And I think this is partly because the concern, and Infantino has said this, you get more investors and we can have more competitions and more players involved and more games and all the rest. And I think you had to go back initially. FIFA was set up in 1904 as a non-profit organization. And this runs contrary to that specific ethos of the founding membership. Also, I think millions, I don't know, billions of football fans around the world feel a great emotional investment in the World Cup. It isn't just a product. This is something, it's for football fans, for players, it's part of the dream that takes them out of their daily lives, and it's not something to be tampered with at the will of a few investment bankers.
Chris, what do you make of the timing here? Because obviously the World Cup was just played in Canada, Mexico, but primarily in the United States. Obviously, Gianni Infantino built up quite the relationship with President Donald Trump. And then now you have a few weeks after that's finished, all of a sudden the brother of his son-in-law, Joshua Kushner, now in line to make this huge investment into owning a minority stake potentially in the FIFA World Cup. What do you make of the timing here? What should we read into that, you think?
I don't think it can be. I don't think it can be unconnected to the fact that he's just got the relationship built with Trump. There's the relationship with Josh Kushner. There's that company. It can't be a coincidence. It's just unlikely to be a coincidence. However, having said that, and going back to what Keir was saying, Keir and I maybe the similar age. And I, when I'm asked these questions, I have to take the football fan out of myself and try and look at this from a business point of view. And how does this work in terms of a business point of view? As a football fan whose first World Cup was the 1958 World Cup with Pelé, And now, having seen all the different World Cups coming along, I think change is possible. One of the things I think that's happened here is what happened with the European Super League. It was really badly presented, really badly communicated, and the whole thing was sort of a bit hubristic. We know what we're doing. We'll just give it to the people and tell them what they've got to do. Sign here, get your £40 million, and off you go. And I think if you looked at some of the detail, especially say of the European Super League and of some of the things that are being said here, there's some merit in some of them, but it's been rejected immediately because of the way it was delivered, because of the arrogance with which it was delivered. And I think that's been really important. And of course, the link with Trump and so on hasn't done the situation any good.
Yeah. Bassiro, do you agree with that? I mean, JP Morgan was involved with the attempted European Super League. They're also now involved with this private investment attempt with FIFA. Do you agree that maybe they should have learned their lesson, as Chris is saying?
Yeah, exactly. Because if we let them, all the private company involved totally about football, we can't limit. And you remember a few years ago, they tried to create a new tournament, kind of Champions League between big countries or big clubs. Okay. And the situation wasn't happened yet. But if the FIFA doesn't give a good example, how he can manage to control the clubs, like in terms of transfer, okay? And if you have a lot of money, you can no limit. You are Morgan or I don't know, you are rich, okay, and you give a lot of money in your club, and how you going to control in terms of transfer? You can buy or sell any player you want. So I think FIFA should give a good example, and if you want to regulate in our football.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's a fascinating discussion. I'll be very interested to see how this all goes. We certainly appreciate your insight today. That's Chris Brady, Bassiro Sacco, and Keir Radnej. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website. It's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it for me, Scott McLean, and from the entire team here in Doha. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment. Stay tuned.